It's the manipulation of politics that we need to be terrified of today. It is the corruption of money that we need to be terrified of today. And it's the conformation of academic world and mass media. We must all be the same. It's those three forces that come: manipulation, corruption, and conformation. And they're all coming from the old institutions that are literally dying because digital has arrived and will crush everything in its way. Say you go with me, for example, Luke, to Brazil, and we go into the jungle in Amazon, and I love being there, right? And you live with the tribe. And, they love their Wi-Fi. They love their smartphone. They all move to Iquitos, the city. It's messy. It's a bit like 19th century London or something like that because it's a messy city. It's third world, right? They definitely prefer to live to the village with the tribe. But they can stay tribal because they've learned from our previous experiences. So I think it's a dialectical process, but I think it's important right now to discuss digital a bit like the cities were in Europe, say 300 years ago. So when people started moving into cities in the 18th and 19th century, these cities were incredibly dirty. They were loaded with shit. People died like mad. The first city in the world that could sustain its own population without just luring people in from the countryside was Hamburg in 1898. Until 1898, all cities had such a bad health record that people just died in droves, right? So I think digital is similar in the sense that I wrote a book called Digital Libido that basically says that the next 50 to 100 years are going to be very, 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 very messy. That's why I work with psychiatry and these things. But there's a dialectical process. We also learn as we go along. And that's what we're learning as we go along. And okay, we made a lot of mistakes. We did that 10 years ago. We don't do that any longer. We do this instead. And that dialectical process eventually, hopefully, faster than 200 years, will for the vast majority of people create an environment where the digital interacts with the physical in a way that actually makes sense to people, that works and creates at least what people think is some kind of beneficial value to them. So I think right now, because we're at the sort of very early stages, it's going to be very messy, and it's going to get messier still. But it's not technology per se, it's the fact that we don't even know where we're at. And I think what's interesting here is that when I agree with you, Luke, and I've followed you a lot, is that I'm fighting for something that I call the free and open algorithm. Elon Musk and a few other guys have joined the crusade by now. And what we mean with that is that we like digital to be digital on its own without interference from the previous institutions. Because what we're seeing right now is that the old institutions, which is politics, academia, mass media goes with academia, and old industry, they're all attacking the internet and moralizing against it. A bit like, the nobility in Versailles would, moralize against people in the streets of Paris in 1789. Although we now know that the streets of Paris in 1789 where it was all at, because people could read and write and count and had tabloids in their hands and had encyclopedias in their hands. And therefore they won over the guys in Versailles, who basically were literate, noble idiots, right? So it's a bit like that it's the manipulation of politics that we need to be terrified of today. It is the corruption of money that we need to be terrified of today. And it's the conformation of academic world and mass media. We must all be the same. It's those three forces that come: manipulation, corruption, and conformation. And they're all coming from the old institutions that are literally dying because digital has arrived and will crush everything in its way. And if digital gets to establish itself, especially if we allow it to be as free and open as possible for as long as it possibly can, which is the exact opposite of communist China. Like if you could have a vision of a free and open algorithm as a standard for people, like your algorithm reflects you and not some kind of person out there who wants to control you. But if that could be the case for the next 50 years, we could create something quite amazing out of it.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with the idea that there's some kind of dialectic process in, how we choose to implement technology. I think I would add to that, I don't know if you disagree or not, but on one level, I don't think that, if we look 200 years in the future after comfortable dialectical change, I don't really think that human life is going to be that different. We're probably going to be doing things more efficiently in terms of computation. But I definitely don't want to give forth the idea that I think that humankind is going to be something fun. I'm not like a transhumanist, you know what I mean? And I think I'm definitely not a big fan of that. I don't know. I don't get those vibes from you, but I'll just say that.
I was one of the co-founders, but I left.
Oh, okay.
It was going way too Platonist for me and not Hegelian. So
yeah. But I was also going to say, I think also, I mean, you kind of criticize what China is doing. You want to open and standard and stuff like that. I would say that I think already there's a lot. I haven't actually drunk any of this tea. There's a lot of experimentation we've really already done with technology, and I think there is a lot of interventions that we can already make that are very sensible. For example, I mean, just right off the top of my head, this isn't like a serious, well, maybe it is a serious thing, but I think it's very reasonable to, ensure that children shouldn't have access to smartphones, for example, or little things like that. And this is just an example. This is not me staking my ego on it, but I do think, when I look at China's actually tried to do things like this. Like they have tried to say children can't play so many hours of video games a week and stuff like that. I don't think that's a thing, because I think already we've lived in a digital era so long that we already know what the really bad things are. And I feel the same way about, pornography and some of this kind of stuff. And I do think there are these people who are very antsy about that, who are more like, they take this rigid libertarian line that we have to jump into whatever Lovecraftian chasm and just deal with the consequences.
I agree with Luke. Humans are not going to change much. They haven't changed much, and even if we do, we move humans into labs and we create wombs that are artificial, so women can be free to do whatever they like. We're still going to have the same babies anyway. Basically, it's not going to be that different. All those things we could possibly imagine to do with human bodies before they're born is strictly superficial, right? But the environment around us will radically change. And it'd be much more technology driven. It'll be drenched in technology. If you manage even to get something like nuclear fusion power around the corner, like that's a design problem. If that's solved in the next 20 to 30 years, I can't even imagine how different our environment will be. So the environment around us will be radically different in the future, but we will be the same as humans. I think eventually AI will conquer outer space and take over the world and leave us humans as some kind of a human zoo and say that you can be the same, you can still be the same. And a bit like white rhinos today, hopefully you survive or something. And then we have a little zoo on planet Earth, and we can come and laugh at you sometimes, and we get to fuck and do our usual dramas and routines and things, and we won't change. But we will create technologies that will take off on their own. And I think that is I'm not deterministic. I'm just saying it's very, very, very likely that we are about to create technologies that take off on their own. And that could, of course, lead to our own death, our own extinction. And I think it's a risk we're going to take because we're not in control of this. We just create it anyway. And I think that's why I wrote this book called Synthesis, where I said that God is actually a word we need to retake, but God is not something from the past. We didn't need God for the universe to exist to begin with. And, well, then the universe itself can be God, creating itself, if you like, but it's the only position that could be okay, philosophically speaking. No, rather, God is a great word for something we're moving towards. So we're about to create God, and we have no idea what kind of God that will be, except that it will be incredibly powerful and probably unified. And that God will then take off and do what God wants, and we have no idea.
I will say that obviously I hope that is not true, that technology will exceed far beyond. And as I said before, I think there are reasons to think that the technological system is uniquely fragile. We look at it and we see this permanence in it. We have this idea that the internet and AI and all these things are going to advance past what we're where we are. But I mean, we all need to make sure that we're hoping and fighting to make sure that is not the case. A lot of people will talk about what you just said as being a fantastic thing. Oh my goodness, AI is going to explore space or something like that. And that's humans living for technology and not really the reverse. And that's probably the worst case view in my mind.